things.
I read that as like last Tuesday, like in my
Gotcha.
head. I saw the Tuesday and I was like, yeah, we did have a call
Of
last
course.
Tuesday.
Yeah, we did talk Monday. That makes perfect sense. Brian,
Because we didn't talk Friday.
We did not. Now, ultimately, what I'm finding is like, in terms of, oh, dude, there's so many
Your
cool
mic is
things
popping,
happening.
by the way.
It's popping?
It's popping.
Popping for anybody else? Why is it popping?
It's like it's peaking.
Weird. Any better?
No.
Mike's
snap crackle.
1 second. Let's troubleshoot.
Did it pick up the right mic? Because I know if I send the wrong mic over, I sound awful. All right. Mooching. Whoa. Whoa. Whoa, beard cam. How do I, no, nobody wants that.
Any better?
Oh, catch it. Yeah, it sounds better so far.
Okay, cool. All right, crazy. Thanks for the tip. I didn't know my mic was popping. That was unplug and replug. So some interesting developments from YouTube to kind of catch you up to speed. So Monday and Tuesday, in terms of news and our shows, they just make sense. Fridays have just been, everybody's kind of chill. Everybody's kind of like, I've got what I need. News isn't breaking. Usually not a lot to talk about on Fridays, but YouTube actually announced on Friday their bigger drive for investment in terms of podcasting, where we've seen that they've added the podcast playlist, and that's what this is in. And if you guys are podcasters, like, I would recommend, if you put your podcast on YouTube, be sure to make sure that they're in a podcast playlist. Because I was like, it gives you your own set of analytics, which for us, when we were ever asked on the podcast, I'd have to provide the podcast audio analytics, and then I'd have to go separately and get the YouTube analytics, because there was just no way of truly combining these things. But the new CEO of YouTube said, like, they're making a more concerted effort into podcasting, because podcasting is a huge thing on YouTube, and it does some interesting things. First and foremost, what they talked about is adding in the an RSS feed, so that technically our YouTube podcast could be the host for wherever podcasts are, which would save me money, because I pay to have the MP3 hosted where YouTube is like free.
We're such a weird company. Like, bandwidth's expensive. What if we could do more of that?
Yes, more of that, please.
What if we harvested more bandwidth for no additional revenue?
Well, I think that there is an additional revenue in terms of, like, they could probably run ads or do things with that. And from a statistics perspective, that could help out, the podcasts more and more. So that's going to be.
I see how we do come out ahead. I don't see how Google comes out ahead.
Well, I mean, they could technically, I guess, insert ads, or who knows what they want to do. And then the other side of it was like having, the RSS feed was interesting, but they already give us the statistics and more, but they're going to also add the podcast into the YouTube music side of things. So that in terms of that, being able to designate a podcast different from a video, I think is going to be a big help, because from, time and time again, you'll see a lot of people who are like, try to, give advice about how to create your channel. And they're like, oh, what every growing channel does to kill their momentum is they start a podcast. And it's because podcast retentions, while bigger numbers in terms of just average watch time, like, et cetera, the retention does not compare to everything else. And YouTube has shifted to a big retention, driven, priority, where podcasts are essentially kind of hurting channels. And so I was like, yeah, segment your stuff into that playlist, so that just from a content, vertical. So anyway, I'm just excited to see them kind of taking a step. Who knows? I mean, they said they're doing all this stuff for live, and it's a slow rollout. So he could have written about this, and we'll see that in 2030. And we're like, hey guys, remember back in 2023 when they said they were starting on this process? It's finally completed. And Robert says, shameless plug, Horizon 11. I absolutely would highlight that. If you guys are looking, honestly, after what happened last week with Square Enix and their update on Final Fantasy 11 and their plan for Final Fantasy 11, I think if nothing else just sings to say go play Horizon XI. That's, if you like 11, that's where the support is, in my opinion.
It's a change in leadership.
It's a change in leadership, and they're doing the right thing. He's wanting his team to be able to go and work on other things, so it's a further reduction in staff. What do you say?
He said, and come back.
Can't hear you now.
He said, and come back. I'm never going to catch this fish.
I'm going to restart it.
I'm never going to catch this fish. Okay. I'll be here. I don't know if YouTube can still hear me. It's possible YouTube can still hear me. Hello, YouTube. Because once he hosts the call, sometimes the cloud just keeps that going. I don't know. He's been having all sorts of issues. I'm just fishing away over here. This is the benefit of starting to gather during this, is I've started just gathering while during these calls. Nice sedentary back of mind stuff. If you miss some casts because you're busy talking, no big deal. Just rather than just sit here and do nothing. This morning, the architectural firm that I'm doing work for, they had a bunch of server maintenance. And so like the people that I am doing the work for, I was asking them questions because I was in the drawings. And I was like, yeah, so I'm making these changes, and here's just a couple of here's a small list of things I'm running into that I just don't know how to resolve. And they're like, okay, well, I can't get in the drawings, so can you just send me screenshots? So just system updates are just hard. So as they were updating everybody throughout the firm, there were times where I had access to the servers, and so I was just sending screenshots of here's what it is before my work, here's what it is after my work, and I don't think this quite lines up. And it's just weird. So the Twitch end's been fine. You read about the servers, and it feels not worth it. One guy basically controls it all. Yeah, I mean, as somebody that doesn't play 11, I read it, and I don't really know anything. It's definitely a change. The previous person, my understanding, had been around since 2012. So, at a certain point, somebody just wanting to leave to work on other things is a real possibility, not just for leadership, but for the actual devs themselves. So there was a lot of that in that statement. The fact that they can't just replace them with full-time devs is just a sign of the project. That's what happens when these projects get put out to pasture to kind of just live. So I don't know. It's the support for 11. And then the private side is really weird to me. The fact that you have basically Square Enix, a giant publisher, allowing a private party to knowingly kind of compete with a product of theirs that has a revenue source. 11 servers do make money. So the fact that it just lives out there is kind of weird. It feels like they could make life really painful for them and kind of get those servers pushed offline. Just from a corporate standpoint, that's what a lot of other companies would do. And so it feels really odd to me. There are definitely companies that have those symbiotic relationships, but even long-term, a lot of those eventually fall short. You have companies like Adobe runs into all sorts of issues where they'll allow certain things to exist within plugins or within certain swatch libraries and things like that. And then eventually long-term that becomes contentious. It's the same issue with 14 and its music library. By sharing ownership of some of the songs, that has never it's made maybe a better product up front, but it has made nothing but headaches long-term. So co-ownership in the corporate space just never seems to end well. It's tough. So I don't really know the correct answer there. As somebody that's not an 11 fan, I just get to kind of watch totally third party and just kind of look on and say, yeah, that does look hard. Like when they, like a lot of what was in that statement felt really reasonable to me. A lot of what was in that statement was like, we have devs that are working in 10-year-old dev tools and never get to move on. And I have a friend who's a programmer on some really old systems, and they're for government contractors and stuff. And so like, depending on how all that stuff's tied up, he can get stuck in a programming language that was old when he started, and it only gets older. And so if he ever gets tired of that work, it's going to be hard for him to go out and find another job compared to somebody that's been working within the up-to-date tools. So he just ends up in this weird spot where like it can hurt his career and he's bored. So he's staying in a job, and like, yeah, they can keep giving him raises to keep him around, I guess, until they're at the end of their funding. And then he's just kind of stuck. So I can see how the 11 team kind of gets put in a weird spot where when there's a leadership change, it's also time to say, hey, we need for this dev talent to have the ability to go work on other things. It's tough. Here we go. You stream to UWU to share prog videos with your static, and it auto mutes because it uses the primal versions of the tracks. That's so annoying. I mean, it's cool that there is music that is that neat out there, but like, yeah, the primal stuff, it's not super good at. You did see Square added tons of 11 merch recently to their online merch store. Well, that's a good sign so that they're not done investing in the project, right? If they were truly going to just let it die out, you would just start scrubbing any references to 11, and you would just redirect out all traffic to new stuff. So the fact that they're still willing to monetize it says that they still think it has value. If they didn't think anybody would buy it, they wouldn't list it. And they would not invest any time and effort in merch. So, speaking of plushes, there's like these squish mallows. There's these new, they're effectively Beanie Babies. They're cheaply made, felt, super squishy stuffed animals that mimic Beanie Babies. And there's ones that are like, they're from like $15 up to like crazy amounts. And I am just now learning about this, a sign that I am out of it, because that is what I guess like people my niece and nephew's age are wanting. They're super soft. We have some because we're in that role where we get to give gifts to kids, but we don't have kids. And so we're always kind of like, what's the right gift for a kid this age? I don't totally know what I'm doing here. We're learning. So last Saturday, you spent all day down south in Florida at a Hyundai dealership and got your first car. Well, congratulations. I bought my first car. Do I have to let him in? No. I bought my first car when I graduated from college. I bought it from my parents for the price that the dealer offered them because they were ready to sell it. So they got the dealer price, and then I matched it, and I went and got a bank loan. And I also remember the first day I paid it off. Ooh. I was so excited. I had this paycheck from work, and it was a bonus check. And I took the bonus check to the bank, and then I drove to the bank where my car note was held because I didn't know. I was like, can you pay it off online? Like, I don't know how this works. So I went and I said, I'd just like to pay my car off today. And they said, okay, great. The manager would love to help you with that. So the manager's like, is it your first car? I was like, yes. And they like brought me a Coke and like some chips, and the staff came in. They were like, oh my gosh, I remember when I paid off my first car. What a big moment. I was like 28 at the time and something like that. And I was so excited. They were so congratulatory. And I was like, wow, this feels really good that they like made this moment that would have traditionally maybe been shared with friends and family, but I didn't really have any of that around at the time. And so I was so excited. And they sat me down. They're like, so let's talk about rates and stuff and getting you into a newer car.
Yeah.
And I remember this feeling from like so happy towards how good strangers could be to just sheer anger. Like just, and I said, so you did all this because you want me to take out a new line of debt? And they were like, well, isn't that like an amazing opportunity to kind of roll this? And I was so angry. So I have these incredibly fond memories of the day I bought my first car, and I have these incredibly fond memories of the day I paid it off, all the way up to like 10 minutes after it was paid off.
It's like, congratulations. Would you like to sign up for being right back into debt for this depreciating asset?
I was really angry. But yeah, buying my first car, I was so excited. Drove it to dinner that night. I think we had food at the house, and I was like, I want to drive somewhere. Like, we can put that food in the car and we can drive and eat it somewhere, but we're going in this car.
It's paid off. It's my car. Heck yeah, dude. Sorry about that. I actually, even after I rebooted, I just had to like unplug everything and plug it all back in. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank goodness. Because I was like, if you couldn't hear me, then is it popping?
No.
Okay, weird. All right, Go XLR was just like, it needed some TLC, so we were able to give it some of that TLC. So welcome in, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. I really am bummed that I missed Chris's Final Fantasy XI talk. You mind recapping it for me, just because I generally would be kind of curious, because we were talking about the recommendation, or at least I was, for Horizon.
There's new merch in the store, which is like, I think that's a good sign for a project that they're still willing to monetize it, because that says they believe there's commercial interest, right? Because if they really thought it was a dead project, they would be like, nobody wants this.
The other theory is that 11 stays up as long as it stays in the black, as opposed to like, as if it dips into the red, like Square Enix is just gonna like say, all right, thank you.
So, and like, I don't know, the idea that the letter had a lot of truth to it for me, like as somebody that's not emotionally invested in the games, like I don't have any heartbreak there. The idea that there are devs that have been trapped on old dev tools on a project that can run for years and years, like, that can be a career ender. Like, you go to apply for the next thing and they're like, hey, do you know how to use any of the 5 tools we use? I've never even heard of those.
Right.
Great. We'll call you.
Yeah.
What
are you good at? Well, I'm really, really good at PS2 dev kits. Oh, we're not working on the PS2. Did you say PS5? PS5 dev kits?
Yeah.
No. The two. Well, and Square Enix shut down your position. Like, that was a weird hill to die on as a developer. Like, all right, we tip of the hat game. Like, that's where, like, me as a developer, I totally empathize with the situation they're in. The dream, though, is like, I wish they would just literally like put it into the Final Fantasy 14 engine so that everybody could kind of benefit from building out those
letter. Their existing team wouldn't be able to do that. They would have to rotate people in from another team anyway. So like, it sounded like
they have to start over. Like, they can't. Well, there's also a hard limitation on the dev kit. So like, they're not making any more of these. So they literally would have to start over and look at putting that game built in a different engine. So it could end up being just like a victim of the time and the circumstances, you know, that it was all built in. Which is a bummer. Like, it's a bummer, because one of the things that I've talked to some diehard Final Fantasy XI players, and the thing I've told them is like, you would have to make some concessions if they were ever to remake Final Fantasy XI. They could not make Final Fantasy XI for today's market the same exact way that it launched back in 2003, 2002. They'd have to literally just say, okay, we can have a sandbox, we can have a hardcore style things, but you're going to have to give up some quality of life, because the biggest boss outside of Horizon XI is getting into the game, is getting registered, is navigating all of it. Because if you were to try it, Chris, it would be so foreign to you. You think Final Fantasy XIV's process is convoluted? Final Fantasy XIV's process is it is the Cadillac experience of Square Enix's online registrations. So just like at its core, the end game, the biggest, hardest boss is actually
Battle.net's so easy.
Yeah.
Like when downloading the Diablo beta, I was trying to be careful because I wasn't sure if I wanted to buy the game yet, and I was like, I don't want to accidentally buy it. Like they will just take your money. They have no hesitation. They're like, no, We'll take your money. We will install it at your convenience. As a matter of fact, at our convenience, we'll put it on your machine when it's ready and update it. So when the game comes out, you'll just already have it. Like, and I was like, I was trying to be careful in the launcher because it was late at night and I was installing it. And I was like, I don't want to accidentally spend $90. And like, and Battle.net makes that possible.
Yeah.
Square Enix, you're like on support, yelling at them, take my $90. And they're like, sir, I'm going to need you to calm down. We're not actually looking for money right now. And I'm going to hang up if you offer it again. And so it's just Nintendo and Square Enix are the two companies that I just find it so hard. And the hardest thing about marketing is like, how do you get somebody to want to give you money?
Right.
And then you get somebody over all of that, which is what like 90% of businesses are out there. Like if somebody could just teach us how to get to the willing and able customers, that would be immensely valuable. And Square Enix is like, no, we know where those are. We don't actually know how to take the money once they're offering it. What? You just take it. You just take it. Like
just take the money.
Just take the money.
Shut up and take the money. Now, Daniel in chat says, I think rather than do anything with Final Fantasy XI, they should work on a new MMO with a 4 to 5 year development time frame. I'd be thrilled if Final Fantasy 17 or 18 was an MMO. What do you think, Chris?
What does a new MMO from Final Fantasy offer alongside Final Fantasy 14? If we take Yoshi P's Q&A questions and everything this weekend and up until now very seriously, and we say that Final Fantasy 14 is going to be around at least another 10 years, what does another MMO offer that is not possible to get just within Final Fantasy 14 or some modification there of it? That's enough different to justify another game, not just a little bit different. Like, oh, I'd prefer this. Better glamour system or something like that. But like, what is a totally different play experience?
So for me, I think that's where you're talking about a completely different combat experience, which would be action. And I know a lot of people don't want action, and I'm not saying that they're wrong for not wanting, like, not getting on the action train. Sure. But in terms of, again, thinking outside of the me's, my generation, or like, I guess our generation, millennials, but shifting into what are, the kids playing? What are they interested in? How do we get them into this? Because I think the best solution, because a lot of people talk about, the MMO genre and this dying status. If you go into the MMO subreddit, like that's the conversation of the day. Like, oh, but a lot of it is because, like, are we bringing in new players? Like, are we growing the vast majority of what it means to be within this space? And I think that's essentially what you want to look and target. And when, again, you start thinking of what is a 10-year game, and it's a lot. I don't think you do this with a 4 to 5 year development time frame. I think you start to sit here and say, all right, pre-planning on this is, 3 years. And then we need to make sure we've got the time, money, resources, and we're using the technology so that by the time this game launches, you're looking at, something that can really take you and dominate the 2030s, right? You're talking about a decade plus of domination. Let Final Fantasy 14 fund that and then build to that so that you can sit here and have that. Because at some point, you're looking at a 20-year-old MMO. And the question is that do you continue to reinvest in that technology? And if they can continue to Frankenstein it and ship a Theseus it and really fundamentally replace the whole game and make it attractive to players of, of all ages, then I think that's your plan. But that ends up being, I think, kind of a risk, because you could wind yourself into a situation where you get leapfrogged again, right? Where all of a sudden 2030 comes out and it's like, why are they like, who's playing World of Warcraft? Who's playing these games? This new game on this technology came out mid 2020s, and that ends up becoming like the one of the big defining factors. I don't know, but I think you have to have something different. Like if it's just the same, if it's just another skin, this is just a 14 clone, a lot of people would feel frustrated. Same thing what happened with Destiny first kicked over. It's like, hey, it's Destiny 2. This is gonna be great. And then it's like, wait a minute, like we have nothing. Like it's like it was so bare bones that it was just like you ended up having to sit around and wait for them to actually then start to release content years later,
Well, that's my answer to that. Is it's just another question, because like that's the hard part, is you've got to have something that's commercially viable, that doesn't damage your existing property. And for the people that play 14 and are like, I don't want an action MMO. good. Like the goal is to catch a different group of people. So
Yeah.
like if you find that like the 14 fans are super excited about it and nobody else is, that's probably a sign that it's too close to 14. So you're looking for something that's drastically different. Needs to be drastically different. And
Now,
like if Final Fantasy as a franchise is not historically PvP based, so I think different combat system is a good start to the sort of thing you would be looking at for a different way of storytelling.
yeah, it's got to feel so different that all of a sudden you're attracting in a new base and not necessarily even competing with yourself. But that then shifts to a good question that I have for you. Final Fantasy, we are assuming 7.0 is going to like bring in the graphics update. April 3rd, they're doing the server upgrades. So you're continually seeing a tech upgrade within 14. Do you feel like 7.0 with its graphics update is going to feel like new and fresh enough that it's going to re-engage and re-excite the community?
People say that graphics matter. Elden Ring just got their new ray tracing or whatever rolled in. Graphics draw people in. Graphics make people look over and go, ooh, what's that? They don't keep people.
Shiny.
Good play keeps people.
Yeah.
I do not believe that their goal is going to be to alienate minimum system spec. So just for the sake of graphics. So if minimum system spec has to go up because they're increasing other things, then the graphics get to come up to meet that. But I don't think graphics alone are enough of a reason to update minimum spec on this genre of games. So no, I think that the graphics will be pretty. I think the screenshots will be prettier. But ultimately, I think there are going to be people that say it's not enough of a difference, or they don't even see the difference in certain parts of the world. I think you're going to be looking at something that is prettier and is better, but I don't think you're going to jump us from 27 million to 50 million players off of anything you can do to the game graphically.
Does bringing the game to Xbox help out with that number?
Yeah, there's a ton of people that don't have access to the game or, don't have regular access to the game that play on other platforms. And so anytime you can add a platform, that's a straight up growth vertical. And that doesn't mean there aren't people who are on existing platforms that wouldn't move over to Xbox or something like that. But there are definitely people that only play Xbox games that it's not an option. So yes, adding any new platform, having official Stream Deck support where there's like better UI and stuff over there, that's a growth vertical. It wouldn't matter if it was somehow browser based. And even if people are like, well, it runs worse. The browser based version runs so much worse than mine. You wouldn't be able to ultimate rate on this. It would still be a growth vertical because you would have people that hop into the free trial. I mean, right now the login campaign goes through early next month. If you are on somebody who's on the starter edition, where normally you have to pay a sub, you can free log in right now. And if you go to the website before the end of this free login campaign, you can add Stormblood onto your free trial or onto your starter edition for free. So like they're interested in bringing in new players that have tried the game before and have fallen off. And I don't see why you wouldn't also be interested in adding new players on new platforms other than just the cost of going there. And so like, I think at this point, Xbox is just a cost thing. And you have to wonder, is it just the cost of going over there? Or are they also giving up some number they received from Sony to not do it? Like, is there a catch and kill going on?
That's what I wonder at some point, because all the language has been, yes, yeah, we would love to be on Xbox, and Xbox, like, we would love to have them here. And it always has been like a numbers thing, right? Because we know that, she's talked about every version, every expansion, every platform adds to their, like extra testing and extra work. It's like that. Well, that's a problem solved with the dollar, right? That's a problem that if Microsoft was like, hey, we're missing several key numbered titles, 14 being one of them, off of our platform. How do we fix that? And Microsoft has a big enough, bank that they could write that check. But why has that check not been written? That's where one of the things with the whole Xbox acquisition of where like, hey, they're petitioning and subpoenaing Sony. It's like, what's that cost? And the thing for me though is that it with an MMO as opposed to like something like Final Fantasy 16, where 16 isn't a ongoing revenue driving game that doesn't have a subscription, it doesn't have a cash shop. 14 does. It has the subscription, it has the cash shop. Like if you're trying to block that game from your like a competitive platform, like that's got to be an ongoing cost. That's got to be something where it's like, for this period of time, we're just going to keep paying you guys so that it stays here. It stays on this platform in and of itself, because I do think it's lucrative. Like I think that every, you could, I think I would argue that you could pick up, at least a couple 100,000 players. Sure, you're not going to pick up 30 million on an Xbox platform, but to not be in that presence and to not have that say, you're also giving up to the competitors. Diablo 4 does it. I was able to confirm that. I was playing on PC, playing on Xbox, and play on PlayStation 5. Same character, moving forward, everybody's playing together.
I mean, you have to buy your site license just like 14, right? So you have to buy the game on all of them.
I think overall, for the vast majority of gamers, that's not a roadblock, right? Oh, I want to play on a different platform. Okay, like there's an entry fee to that. Not a problem. You're seeing also games take it on with free to play, like Wayfinder. Wayfinder is going to do these things. At some point, you're going to be the odd duck out. You're going to be the one who's like, oh, okay, well, I would play 14 with you, but we were playing Wayfinder and Destiny, and we were playing Diablo and all of these games together across all these different platforms with our Discord integration. And then all of a sudden you're looking at Final Fantasy 14 going like, what gives? What's the problem here?
As it sits, it's really hard to complain about the way 14 does things too loudly on that front, because you kind of have to stay in your lane to see it as a problem, because relative to the space, they support more platforms than most.
Yeah.
And so I would say as of now, that's very much like, if somebody thinks that that's 14's like biggest growth problem, that's a sign that they're not playing enough other games, because there are other games that are perfectly commercially viable that don't support any consoles. So World of Warcraft and Guild Wars jumping to mind as two games that are absolutely capable of going to console and just don't.
We got some interesting comments that I want to bring up here in a second, but before we kind of shift off of a little bit of Final Fantasy, which we'll come back to here in a second, TA Class says, Final Fantasy 14 became so forking boring, and I love forking, thanks for self-censoring. When they added the new Relic, I much rather farm dungeons for books instead of just tomes. How are you feeling with the current state of the Relic? We know that this Friday is a good time to plug that we'll be live with the live letter 6.4. We're going to get new information, and the speculation is that we'll see bigger kind of grinds and bigger kind of investments within the Relic. But has the frustration, have you seen any of the frustration dip down yet, or are people still really frustrated by the Relic step that it was added this last patch?
I think people were just like fatigued by, we sat there and yelled at each other about a chair, and then there wasn't anything to do. And so like I think everybody's just kind of like, after a big long tantrum, we're all down for a nap right now, and we got a live letter on Friday. So like, yeah. I don't think there's anything that worth being upset about right now. Live letter on Friday will tell us how big patch 6.4 is, and people will be reminded ideally how large the front half of a patch is. The point X portion, 0.4 looks to be plenty big. I think there's people that, in theory, if we look at past announcements, ideally there's people that are surprised and delighted by just forgetting. Like that would be the perfect world, right? If you're just surprised by, imagine if I told you that I was going to bring over barbecue Friday night, and then you just forgot. And then Friday night gets here and you're like, I'm so hungry. It's such a long week. And I'm like, hey, I'm here with barbecue. You're like, this is amazing. I was just thinking that. So like ideally there were people that forgot that in 0.4, they said that we would be getting Criterion variant updates across this patch cycle. In 0.4, we'd be getting Island Sanctuary updates across this patch cycle. In 0.4, we get a new raid and a new Savage. We get a new dungeon. We get new MSQ. During the 0.4 cycle, we go to FanFest. During the 0.4 cycle, we get all new crafting and gathering nodes and recipes, because it's an item level update, which also means there's new tome gear. There's a Moogle Tomestone event going into the 0.4 cycle, which will have all sorts of other stuff. And so like ideally this just whole list of things, Hildy, Relic, all of this just is like, oh, 0.35 was just a time in my life and it's over. Like it's over now. Keep in mind that the first live letter is historically about, give or take, 60 days out for the patch. I'm predicting May 23rd for patch 6.4. It could easily be May 30th. So we still have some time, but I think the live letter helps remind you, like, there's big things right around the corner. So any frustration towards 0.35 kind of takes a step back, in my opinion, starting this Friday.
Yeah, I agree. And let's go into our next comment. Let's go and talk about Diablo. The Daniel writes, do you think Diablo 4 will make a sizable dent in the potential sales and hype for Final Fantasy 14 being in the same general genre, even though it's an ARPG as a subgenre?
Do I think that Diablo makes a dent in sales for 14? No, because I don't think that the 0.4 cycle is a big sales cycle for 14. We will not yet have a pre-order button for the expansion. We'll know the name of it. We won't have our pre-order button yet. So I think Diablo 4 hype will be worn out. Diablo 4 will be looking at season 2 or 3 by the time you're in the huge sales cycle when they sell 1 million copies of, 1 million billion copies of 7.0. So I don't think it really affects it. There's always new games coming out. So there will probably be a dozen major titles that release between Diablo 4 and 7.0. And any one of those will also be kind of a valid way of draining our budget.
And Daniel clarifies that he meant 16 instead of typing 14, which I would say, honestly, by the time 16 comes out, though, which is at the end of the month, a lot of people are going to have their fix for Diablo. The hardcore players are going to hardcore play Diablo, just like anything else. Diablo will have some more staying power, but I think by the time 16 drops, honestly, the fact that it's a PS5 exclusive, honestly, I think it's probably going to hurt the game in the longest run, because by the time it still comes out to PC, you're still missing out on the initial hype. Someone's probably already spoiled the game for you and the story for you, and you're just going to play it because you're a fan of Final Fantasy, and so it has a real risk of not picking up new players. So I think, honestly, yeah, like with the fact that Diablo is everywhere, you can play it. I played on Steam Deck this weekend.
They're two drastically different games. So I think that if you have Final Fantasy fans who love combat systems and they look at the 16 combat system and maybe it's not their favorite, they may jump into Diablo, right? So like they're two drastically different games. Yes, Diablo has a story. Yes, 16 has combat, but like one is a narrative-based single-player game. That is its dominant metric. And then the other is like, I just don't think Diablo ever becomes a narrative-based franchise. I get that there's people that like the world. I get that there's people that, but like the biggest character's main character development is stay a while and listen. And that's it. What do we know about him? Yeah, he likes you to stay
and listen.
And like, that's it. Like that's most of Diablo lore for a pretty substantial portion of the base. There are people that will play it for the story, but if you're that into new stories, you buy both games anyway.
Yeah.
Because you're always having to consume the next story.
Right. Izzy Pride asks, so you'd buy the same game twice just to play it in a different room? I'd buy it 10 times.
I own Final Fantasy up through Shadowbringers on PlayStation, Mac, and PC. And it's exactly the same way. I had to buy all 3 copies. And the reason I haven't moved over for Endwalker is I've been perfectly happy on my PC. But if I started traveling more or something and I wanted it on my Mac, I would have to buy a Mac copy of Endwalker so that I could play there. And if I wanted to go sit on my TV, I would have to buy it for my PlayStation.
Yeah. That's the thing I've advocated for, especially with cross save. It's like, let me continue and I'll buy the game in different spots as long as I have that option. But if you don't give me that option, I'm going to go who gives me the option. It is literally like, it doesn't bother me whatsoever, especially if I like the game.
I think that's the advantage of Xbox, is that it's all Microsoft. So I'm pretty sure I own Call of Duty on my PC. I've just never installed it because I bought it on my Xbox.
I don't think so at all, namely because they don't own Call of Duty yet. But as soon as they do, you'll probably see that same kind of thing. They have that play anywhere, buy once, you own it on PC and Xbox. That's that whole Xbox thing, which is an advantage that they have over PlayStation and an advantage that they flex outside of these lawsuits with the different regulatory bodies. Because when it comes down to it, when they were talking to them, they were like, "Oh man, we're in like last place when it comes to video games, and this is just going to help us make more competitive." But then internally, they're like, "We're counting every PC on the market as us." Like, guys, we're doing great when they're talking to their shareholders and things like that.
All right. So the question is, do I own Modern Warfare? How can I tell? Upgrade available. Now I just want to know.
And Brian, while Chris looks this up, says, yes, I was playing Diablo 4 on Steam Deck this weekend. I got it working, but it was also having a couple of like random hiccups because it's not native to that platform. There were some nice Proton experimental versions that rolled out, so I was able to kind of test those. I did not put a guide together for it because it would crash, and sometimes getting back into the game like was a little bit more challenging, and so it ended up being a level of frustration that I didn't want to invite anybody into for a beta. But if this then gets more supported for the Steam Deck for launch, it's going to be a great platform. It plays great on controller. I'm very, very pleased with how Diablo 4 plays on the controller, especially for PC. But it has crossplay, cross save. So my hope now is that Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard before Diablo 4 launches on Xbox. So I've already purchased it for the Battle.net launcher. I will see if I do not have to purchase it for the console. Yeah,
I do not own it. It looks like it's only $60. Has it dropped in price?
That's probably because it came out at the $60 price. Microsoft raised the prices on console games to 70 for 2023. Well, I mean, like everybody's just going up to 70, and they, honestly, it was like they held off longer than I expected that they would hold off for.
Yeah. Games were the same price from like 1998 to 2018.
Yeah,
like we had a good run, guys. But as soon as the ceiling broke, now they can do whatever they want. Now we're going to see $100 games.
So while we wait for we gotta let me add this here, share screen, boop boop boop. Let's go ahead and dive into some comments with you guys. Y'all been leaving some really cool comments on the videos and the VODs themselves, so thank you for doing so. This actually came from Twitch, and this is in relation to Diablo 4. So we'll just kind of blend this all together, and then I've got some other comments that I think will be fun for us to explore together. Veiltis, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name. So D4 comes out, months go by. What would you like to see them do to get you back into a new season? Diablo 4 using and bringing in the seasonal battle pass model that everybody has nowadays. What do you think?
So we've only seen the level 25, so we have no idea what the Paragon system does. We have no idea what all of the uniques and affixes that are locked behind higher levels and or higher difficulties do. And we don't really know how a lot of the skills feel and act and behave and manipulate off of each other by the time you add all that in and you get to experience skills beyond level 25. So we can already see the beginnings of some of those systems. Others we have to just guess at. So let's assume all that matures in a way that we really enjoy. I would say more affixes, just in general, more affixes. I'd love to see some of the affixes really start to cause weird interpretations of the skills. A lot of them right now, at least at low level, seem to be very geared towards like make this skill do more of the thing. And I'd love to see it make this skill behave differently. Yeah. That way you start to see really crazy build variety. I don't know how account wide the game is. I only played through the beta on once, but like that's something that if they want me to play more than one character right now, it still feels very, very Diablo 3, where I only played through on one character, as opposed to on Diablo 2, I would play on this character to farm up gear, get a piece, roll over to the other character, try it out for a bit. Okay, I'm still not quite happy with it. Maybe still go back to my farming character and farm up a little bit more. So it felt more like I had a stable. And then like I think that having difficulties beyond, what are they calling the open world at max level? Torment as the highest. Yeah. Having higher torment levels or having things that kind of manipulate the way the world works. I don't exactly know how the season's going to work because it has this very Lost Ark Guild Wars feel of like map completion. And I don't really know, like, do I have to re-clear the map every season? So I don't know what all that does right now. So I don't know what all the word season means. But those are the sort of things that would draw me back in, is new affixes, new ways to play. World scaling is an incredibly interesting idea for the term hardcore. So like, I'm interested to see how hardcore works on the game because that looks hard.
Yeah. For me, I think it's going to be about, adding in new quality of life, adding in more build options and things to go and chase, namely for the season. Like some interesting challenges and goals and bosses would be kind of unique. If they continue to tell stories about, the world and things like that, I think that could be very kind of enticing to kind of jump in. As somebody who likes stories in these games, I skipped over all the story within the beta because I'd like to experience it, all when it actually is out in June. So I think, I don't know yet in terms of like build variety, like in terms of like, being able to save builds. because I haven't seen that UI yet. I was looking and am hopeful for that, because one of the things that when it comes down to building out your character is to ideally to be able to kind of say, hey, I want to do this or I want to do that. And with the skills and the options that they have, if I can snapshot that and make it easy. And if that's not in the game at launch and comes down later, that'd be great. But one of the things that was really surprising from the closed beta to the open beta was just they actually did update. They did add in more settings and more features as a controller player that I was thrilled to see. So them just continuing to invest in both, all avenues will be great. Will I play every season? Probably not, because that's just not the way of it. But what's interesting, what I'd like to see though, is them completely update their seasonal model to something what Wayfinder's doing, because I think what we were talking about and what Chris has alluded to with the FOMO level is that Wayfinder, you can buy the season, you can equip the season, you keep the season, you can only buy the season during the season. And at some point, we're assuming that they would do some kind of bundles and packs down the road. Makes sense, right? But that essentially will have me with Wayfinder log in, and even if I'm not actively hardcore grinding on whatever in Wayfinder at the time, I'll just go buy the season, because when I do want to come and play, I don't want to sit here and be like, man, I should have bought the season.
It also lets them take seasons and make them more specialized. So this could be like season of the mount, and it's a bunch of new mount skins, and it's focused on like using the open world. And so a lot of the modifications are open world driven. And what that means is that later down the road, at the time, if somebody doesn't like it, they just skip that season. But what it means is like, thank you guys so much for 10 seasons. Right now on the store, seasons 1 through 5 are bundled, and they are all half price. And then of course, through like the Steam type system, you have these, they've gotten a lot better at a lot of these saying like, and if you buy it, you're not buying all 5, you're buying the ones you're missing. So if you bought 3 of them back then, it's that price per unit, but you're just buying the 2 you missed. And then you just activate one. So you're like, hey, I want to work on mount stuff right now. And so that starts to create some resilience in the game, where if they ever make a season that's not your thing, and it's like, hey, this is a season all about dungeon crawling, and you're like, I hate the dungeon crawling in this game, then you can be like, okay, well, then I'm just going to equip a different season. So like Guild Wars does this with their reward track system in PvP. And it lets you kind of choose your reward track. So, and for Final Fantasy fans, since a lot of people here know Final Fantasy, just imagine if your PvP series, if you could choose which series you were working on. So if there's a series that resulted in armor and a series that resulted in a mount, you could choose which one your PvP experience is being credited to, one at a time. And you can toggle, whenever you want. So if you get 1 to level 10, get the reward for that. And you're like, I think I'm done with this one, I don't want the level 25 reward. That's fine. Just hit it back to the other one. And you have access to whichever seasons, in this case, you've purchased in a Diablo sense, because it seems like they'd be selling you seasons because that's their monetization method. So like, I would love to see that, because it takes away the FOMO element, because then you're not like Call of Duty has seasons, and they have a season ending in like a couple days here, and I'm really far from completing it. And now it's like, well, then why try? Like, I can't go back and finish it. It's just going to end. So it makes me not care. So that's kind of where I'm at.
We're pulling up our next comment. Yep, perfect. All right. So that's going to probably wrap up our Diablo talk for today's show. I'm sure it will be. I did too. I had a great time. I was unfortunate to have enough time to jump into the other classes, because I was like, I'm gotta get 1 to 20. I'm gonna get my puppy, and I absolutely did. So
there's some pain points in item management.
Yeah.
I don't actually think it's the tooltips that's the problem. I think it's that in the item, like, it can't auto salvage. It can't auto put the slash on based on rarity or based on conditions. So like, as I'm just picking things up, I have to like go through each thing, and like, it can't just start to help me. And then the map, like everything about the map and the mini map blows. And that just needs a complete update.
I don't think they'll have the map like done by
it's gonna be like that on launch.
Yeah, but the thing is that I appreciate about Diablo in this case is that this is a beta. They have like less than 3 months, but still enough time to kind of address some kind of core issues, some rubber banding, some bugs, and things like that. So like the fact that they rolled in new settings week over week, I was like, oh, that's great. So that they're still iterating and things like that, which gives me a lot of excitement because I felt like the overall experience was rock solid. And then they just need to continue to work on that. And that's what I think the seasonal model will actually give them, is the ability to continue to enhance and improve and take that feedback and find what the community really likes to do and enhance that and do this and etc. And yeah, playing Barbarian is absolutely the weakest. It's like, oh man, like I was really wanting to spend time with the Druid, but man, the Sorceress was a lot of fun, and Necro looked really cool, and was happy to see a lot of people running around with that. Just, yeah, like
I'm
I think
not really
there's
that
some
worried about how the game feels at 25. If they change nothing and the game sucks and is good in all the same ways at 25, it doesn't matter. We spend all of our time in that game at cap.
Yeah.
And honestly, the bigger question is like, can they keep people's clients from crashing? Can they handle the queues? Do they know how to have their server stuff running? So like, there's all these different systems that, like, hopefully it was much more of what Demon's saying in chat. Hopefully it was much more of a stress test and less of a beta, where we're going to have a smoother launch window because of these 2 weekends.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right, now let's jump into kind of our last comment for today. I swear I am not picking negative sounding comments. A lot of people just right now on the Work to Game are leaving very frustrated comments about Final Fantasy 14. You might not share in this view, but just as a heads up, if you guys got some positive thoughts to share those. Leave all comments are good, and I'm just going to keep drawing comments into our massive collection as we work our way through them and kind of take these on a piece at a time. Kiss My Kamachi says, distinct jobs within roles, less homogeny. Fixed healers that do not spam one button, fixed combat that includes crowd control and a variety to defeat enemies besides burning them down to 0 HP. More encounter designs that are more than just to evade and bait movement exercises. EQ was was way back in 1999, did combat better. That is not good. So some players are frustrated, and I think this is where this is my kind of viewpoint on this, is that this is just an underlying frustration that ends up being like, once all the other stuff is like, all right, I'm going to hyper focus in on this core issue, because I do not see them changing the battle system in 7.0 into such a way. I think what they have telegraphed within Shadowbringers and an Endwalker is going to go against what Kiss My Kamachi is wanting for the battle system in 7.0. So Chris, 7.0, like, what are your thoughts here? Because we've talked about the casualization of tanks that happened and our thoughts there, but this is also focusing in on healers.
I think as they've added like the 2 hardest ultimates ever to game, as they've spent an entire expansion heavily leaning into PvP, and as they've realized more and more that people are leveling more than one job, they're doing relics on more than one job. They are trying to make sure that people can have a cohesive experience across all their jobs, and whatever their favorite job fantasy is, that they can take that job into as many types of content as possible. The community kind of freaked out when Machinist and some tanks got left out of Ultimate Prog for a couple weeks. And the downside of having classes that are distinct and classes that are special and unique is that ultimately when content gets really hard and tightly tuned, there will be one that is mathematically better, that is more optimal based on the movement of the fight. It might be better just on a dummy, but it also might just be better because of the way the fight has you move, or because of the way the damage windows are timed. And so they've tried to tie them all to these 2-minute windows, and that's created a whole new set of problems. And so as you try to make these jobs feel more unique, they're going to get less balanced. So it's the problem is from somebody that's not really affected by this, when I try to listen to both sides and understand this, I'm hearing people say that they want more job variety. And then I'm hearing people frustrated that why can't they just balance it? And those seem to be at odds, because every time the game is perfectly balanced, it's because all the jobs do the same freaking thing. And every time something starts to become unique in some way, people go, and this one's the best. And then everybody else gets left out in the cold. So I don't really know how they solve this. I think odds are what they'll do is they'll pick a role to focus heavily on changing the way it moves. It feels like Fizz Ranged is one that's really struggled across this expansion to feel quite right. So I'd love to see them take on Fizz Ranged. as the role to focus on in 7.0. I know healers are really frustrated. I don't know how they change that without just drastically changing the whole system. And then they pick 1 or 2 jobs to heavily screw with. And then they add 2 new jobs. And that's what we get on launch. And then we see continued updates across the expansion, like Paladin's gotten a pretty big update across the course of this expansion. That's what I guess. You can, hopefully they add some elements that are unique. But at the end of the day, you have to choose. Do you want the game to be perfectly balanced where everybody can do all the same things and is therefore identical? Or do you want to have everybody be their own unique little snowflake? I don't know.
And then there's rankings to that. Like as soon as it's uniqueness, then naturally we're going to say, well, what's best about this? I think if they can take the uniqueness and design content for that, then you have those different things. Like this job just performs better in Deep Dungeon. And to a degree, Final Fantasy 14 already kind of has that. But Faye says, I'm going to kind of echo this a little bit. It says IMO, the battle system, and the homogeneity, I can't speak today, is a weakness of Final Fantasy 14 and a strength of 11. One of the reasons I'd like to see the next MMO be 11-esque. And 11 had the sub-job system. And yes, there were the meta. There were people like, this is the optimal way to play. But there's content and other things you could do. And so the sub-jobs themselves ended up acting as that unique flavor, because a red mage was a red mage, but a red mage sub-white was a healer. A red mage sub-black was able to do like different things and, things of that nature. So you could end up having a different kind of role style. But here's the thing I've kind of talked about, because people are asking me about this, because I personally get frustrated when balance is the be all end all, when balance is king of the discussion, because like you're never going to achieve it. And so whenever it's held up as this glorious thing, like, ETH Demon saying you can have balance or you can have uniqueness, but you can't have both. Like that's absolutely true. So in this case, though, when you start to talk about balance, it's not necessarily that one thing becomes, oh, this is clearly a better option, or this for this fight is a clearly better option. Bring the class, not the player kind of mindset, as opposed to the bring the player, not the class mindset. Those are 2 different design philosophies. But what you need is a team that's able to respond within a reasonable amount of time to correct any hyper utilization, where it's like we're not even doing the fight the way it was designed. We're all coming as black mages and we're going to just burn this down because that's how this is now done. That is the established fight. And if that ever happened, to be able to address the reasons why. And I think at its core, it ties back to what Yoshi P's talked about. He wishes he had the team and the budget of World of Warcraft. He wishes he had like the volume of people could work on this. And what we're at, like what I just said, it requires like active resources, lots of work, lots of, it isn't just we're just going to change this by 1% and all things are fixed. It's like sometimes a change can have sweeping consequences unforeseen. And the only time Final Fantasy 14 has done what like I would want them to do, they messed it up royally, and it was only just in PvP. And Chris and I talked about, what is this A patch? Like, okay, did that need to happen? And it hasn't happened since, because I think essentially they kind of looked at it and said, okay, we were too hesitant. And I think a part of that also is the fact that the game's on console. Console has to get certified. There's so many things in the supply chain and like that go on, that it's like to make a change, to do all these things, to make sure it's properly tested, to see how it works overall within a wide range of content. It's a compounding problem. And so I think ultimately that's why you see Final Fantasy 14 maintain with that. And I think you're going to continue to see more homogenization as the game develops, because there, I don't think, is another choice unless that they're able to really massively ramp up the size of their team, or do something like they did in PvP. One of the neat things that the jobs feel hyper unique in PvP in 14, because they really spent time and redid that system. And overall, I think that was a real positive change at its core. But yeah, I'm with you. Like I wish we had a sub job system. I wish that was something you could do in 14, but that would take, I think, that would be something revolutionary. That'd be a huge risk, in my opinion, for them to go and make a change like that, because there's no guarantee that it would be like well loved. It would be well loved by some, but no guarantee that'd be well loved by all.
It just creates a new problem. Like, let's say you created the world's most fun sub-job system for open world content.
Mm-hmm.
Then to maintain balance, you don't allow it into Savage. Then somebody's mad about that. Like, look at Blue Mage. The moment you create something that's fun to do, people want to take it everywhere. So if you create a subspecialization that's really fun in Crystalline Conflict, and then it isn't allowed in Savage, or it's not good in Savage, that's going to be really frustrating that the way you play can't be cohesively. We have been presented a game that promises that your favorite flavor of the game can go across as many content types as possible. So the moment you add a way to play and then you don't support that way across subsystems like Bosja Zadnor, Criterion variant that are kind of, deep dungeon that get a little more isolated in how they function, or across the more mainstream systems, Trials, Extreme, Savages, and Raids, or across the things that tend to not really matter as much, hunts, tribes, open world. Like, the moment you limit it from any of those, that doesn't feel good. And we don't have any history of saying, well, we're going to do that anyway. So,
I mean, there is Final Fantasy 11 is that history, but 14 does not.
But 14 does not. And 14 tried it one time with Blue Mage, and it has been a huge pain point. So I don't think we'd ever see them move to a drastic subsystem. I think if anything, you'd see limited type moments where, like, Bosja Zadnor had an armor set associated with it, and that makes it unique. You have Aether pools within your deep dungeons, and that makes them unique. You have a limited set of actions within PvP as a whole, and that makes it unique.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bleed system to system to system.
Yeah. That's why, for me, like, one of the things when they announced Blue Mage, and we've talked about this, I think a couple times in the past, but for anybody who's never kind of heard this expression from me, is like, I really wish 14 had a limited job version of every job, like a limited system versus the curated system. And so that, like, you could say, hey, I'm going to play in this mode, and it just changes some of the rule sets that you could then go and experiment, like with, like, imagine going and having to go unlock your summons for summoner in the limited version of that. And so then you kind of, in a way, toggle it on and off, that if you wanted to decide to compete in that and to have these and play the different contents with that same kind of rule set, so that you could literally kind of, in a way, have the best of both worlds. You turn it on, this is your new version of the job. But what I'm advocating here is ridiculous in terms of, like, pure content and work and volume, that it would just, it's not necessarily what I would call a practical use of development resources, because we don't still yet know what limited means, because limited means blue. And until we get another limited job, will we be able to sit here and say, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if these, you have a curated version of Blue Mage and whatever else comes next, and then you let them into that content, and yet you keep the carnival, you keep all these things that they can do that are specialized to them for people who want that different kind of challenge, that different kind of experience. And that's just going to be the way it is. Guys, this Friday is the live letter for patch 6.4. I'll be covering it over here, just like we're doing right now. And so we were able to highlight y'all's comments both on Twitch and on YouTube. And then tomorrow we've got a live show. New World's season 1 was scheduled to go live, but they have delayed that this weekend. So I'd let Chris know, but we'll still probably talk about New World tomorrow. But as if you guys have been hanging out for the live shows, note that we end up covering quite a few different subjects and topics. And then after the fact, if you guys are still watching this, I usually try to go back through and add the chapter markers and do all those things. And then we talked about briefly before my audio had issues at the start of this show, some new podcast changes. So right now we're not uploading this as a MP3 yet, but as soon as YouTube gives me the ability to RSS this, just note that you'll be able to also enjoy this in audio form, or maybe even video form in that case. Just note that those are some changes that are on the horizon in this case. So guys, thank you all so very much for hanging out. Chris, do you got any final thoughts before I wrap back up and start finishing up the sprint for work?
No, just an announcement for 14 fans. Nothing related to this, just an announcement. Free login campaign going on right now. Anybody that's on a starter edition, if you have friends that have been gone for a while, free upgrade to add Stormblood to their starter edition. That's for the people that are, like, past the free trial. They have a sub, but they haven't really been buying anything past the starter edition. So that'll get that tossed in. The Easter event's going on right now. Live letter this Friday. FanFest is right around the corner, so expect lots of news to start building up as we see more interviews. There was a Q&A this weekend at PAX that was mostly fluff and fun to be part of the community. The big news there was that they are looking to increase the number of displayable items in housing sometime during the 7.x patch cycle, they hope. So very, very vague. The rest of it is all just really fun stuff, like what's your favorite expansion? Pick correctly, Yoshi P. So, you know, really, really fun, neat stuff in there, but nothing kind of groundbreaking per se.
And
so
yeah,
that's about it.
And thanks, guys, for the likes here on the live show. Those help the videos out. We'll be getting these cut up in VOD form. So hopefully you guys have been enjoying those as well as in our shorts. So yeah, just jump in and get engaged. Jump into the Discord if you guys are looking for games to play and more. I have posted my latest comedy set. It's Not Safe for Work over on Ginger Prime Comedy. If you guys want to go give that a watch, those are also getting split up and turned into shorts as well, which are doing incredibly well. So thank you guys all so much for that support. Lots of things coming up down the pipe. It's going to be an incredibly busy, I think, at least 3 or 4 months in terms of games and stuff to be talking about. So hopefully you guys are having a good time out there. I wish you guys all the very best. I'm going to hit end broadcast, and you can go hang out with Chris over on Twitch and continue on these conversations, and then we'll see you next time.